McDonald's is facing one series of unfortunate events after another. The first thing they had to contend with was inflation and seeing their costs rise so substantially that they had to raise their prices substantially in order to remain profitable, especially for local franchisees who own these restaurants. But last month, in October, they also had another setback, as if things already weren't bad enough. They had an E. coli outbreak at some of their restaurants. People got sick, and this made people even more afraid to go to McDonald's. If the price wasn't scary enough, now you're worried about getting sick and possibly dying from eating the food, which is something that people should always be worried about anyways, because even if E. coli doesn't kill you right away, then eating McDonald's long term probably will. And the problem is foot traffic at McDonald's has slowed down substantially, and McDonald's is looking at throwing a lot of money at this problem in hopes that they can fix it. And they already kind of tried doing that when they saw their foot traffic slow down from the higher costs of their food. So as of November 11th, the foot traffic at McDonald's is down about 4% from just 1 year ago. And think about this, guys. I know 4% doesn't sound like a huge number, but when you're talking about a company like McDonald's that has, hundreds of thousands of restaurants worldwide, that is huge. Think about the amount of sales that they lose out on when foot traffic goes down 4% year over year. The thing is, the bigger these companies are, the larger these small numbers work at scale. For a small business, 4% down year over year, maybe not so bad. For a huge business like McDonald's, it's devastating for the franchisees that own these restaurants. As soon as the E. coli outbreak happened, in fact, the very next day, McDonald's US restaurants saw 4.8% lower foot traffic than just the day before. And prior to that, they were seeing actually a 2.8% growth in foot traffic due to the $5 meal deal and having these promotions continue to go on in order to bring people back in. And check this out. In the 10 affected states identified by the E. coli outbreak, foot traffic was down about 9.6% from a year ago as of October 23rd. And these 10 states alone represent about 11% of McDonald's US foot traffic. So that's a huge hit that the restaurant is taking. So now what McDonald's is looking at doing is investing more than $100 million in order to repair the reputation of all of these restaurants. Now, I'm not really sure how money can solve this issue, because to me it's a trust issue. Say you had a best friend that stole your wife or stole your husband or whatever, and you don't trust them anymore. And then, they try to say, well, if I give you $100,000, will you trust me now? Probably not, right? Now, I know this isn't as bad as someone's spouse getting stolen by their friend, but you get the idea. The analogy holds up. The city of Miami Beach is committed to protecting Biscayne Bay. These tanks are used to filter pollutants from floodwater on our streets. So they suck up the floodwater into this thing and then shoot it back out into the bay, I guess. I have to say, guys, I really do miss walking in these beautiful spots here in Miami, and I'm sure many of you who have been wanting me to come back are happy to see the beautiful Florida landscape again. So here's McDonald's plan on spending this $100 million. $65 million of this is supposed to be going towards supporting owners who have lost business, targeting those in the hardest hit states. Approximately $35 million will be invested in traffic driving programs, including marketing efforts. So actually a lot of this money is going to be used to kind of help the restaurants that were hit the hardest from this E. coli outbreak in basically staying afloat and staying in business, which actually is probably a good thing. This is not a government program. It's not like the government's giving out free money here. McDonald's is a franchise business. They collect a lot of money from their franchisees every year, and having McDonald's step in to try and help these small business owners continue to stay in business is the right thing to do. So it's good to see for a change that a big corporation is actually shelling out some of that money to help the people that put the money in their pocket to begin with. But as far as the marketing efforts go, the $35 million in marketing, it's going to be interesting to see, you know, what kind of campaigns they put together. If anybody out there watching the channel sees like an ad that McDonald's puts together, tries to get people to come back after this E. coli outbreak, please send it over to me, shoot me an email. I'll be very interested to see what they're doing and what they're saying to basically convince people that it's okay to come back. Well, it's time to start looking at crazy Miami real estate listings once again. Here we have a house for sale for $9.25 million. They originally listed for sale for $9.75 million back in August. So they just did a $500,000 price cut like it's nothing, guys. This house was sold back in 2018 for $3,330,000, and the current owner is paying about basically $40,000 a year in property taxes on this house. And then right across the street, we actually have another one. This house over here was listed for sale all the way back in February this year for $3 million, and have since cut the price also $500,000. They're down to $2.5 million now as of the beginning of September. No takers yet, and the taxes on this house are only $4,800 a year, probably because they've owned it for quite some time. But the new owner is going to be looking at paying probably $30,000, $40,000 a year, just like the house across the street. But what a difference, you know, like coming back here again, like I knew this was always the case, and I've pointed this out before on the channel, but like pretty much every house that I've walked by in California when I was there has sold, guys. It sits on the market maybe a month or two at most, and then it usually will sell. There are a couple listings that I noticed over there that didn't actually sell yet, and are still sitting on the market basically since I got there in the summer, but that's a pretty rare occurrence. Here in Miami, very common for these houses to sit on the market all this time. I mean, that one since February, that's a long time, guys. We're coming up on almost a year, this house being available for sale and no takers. Now, one thing I want to cover again, just in case people missed in one of my recent videos, is inflation, guys. In case you haven't noticed, inflation is going back up. The PPI index went up 0.2% as of the October reading. The core inflation numbers were sitting at 3.3% in September. Now we're at 3.5% as of October. The CPI even, which is what the Fed was looking at and pointing to over these past couple of months, say, look, we're getting inflation back down to 2%. It's getting there, is actually climbing back up as well, because that was at 2.4% in September. And as of the October reading, it's now sitting at 2.6%. So all of the inflation gauges that the Fed looks at in order to say what's going on with the economy and what's happening with inflation are all going in the wrong direction. They're all going back up. Not a single one is dropping anymore. And on top of that, they just cut interest rates a few days ago. So clearly they are in complete denial of what's happening with the economy. They have so much overconfidence that they know what's going to happen soon that they're just cutting rates anyways. And I was thinking that maybe after the whole election was over, that they might slow down and maybe back off on the interest rate cuts because there's no more political agenda to adhere to. However, they're still calling for another rate cut coming up in December, and it looks like they're just going to be on our way to crashing the economy once again. Another thing we have to talk about is the sheer amount of layoffs that are happening across the country right now. We've seen another huge round of layoffs announced by multiple different companies, which I'm going to go over. The largest one, which a lot of you probably already heard of already, is Boeing, guys. They just issued layoff notices to 17,000 workers this past week. That is huge. That's on par with the Tesla layoffs that we saw earlier this year, where they just announced about 15,000 people are going to be laid off just like that. So they're saying most of the US employees will be notified by mid-November, which is now, and they'll be leaving the company on January 17th. So at least they're not getting fired before the holidays like a lot of these other ones we're going to talk about, and other ones we've already talked about. They are losing their job before the holidays, which is pretty bad timing. And Boeing has 170,000 employees. This is literally 10% of its workforce just being cut, just like that. And it says this, 17,000 workers will be affected by this round of cuts. That is some pretty interesting language they choose to use here. This round of cuts. So just like all these other companies that are laying people off, they go through rounds of layoffs. They're going to lay off these 17,000 people, see what happens with their numbers and their profitability. If it doesn't get to where they're hoping it does, they will have another round of layoffs and let go of more people. This is happening at all different companies, different industries across the country, and yet somehow this is the greatest economy ever. And funny enough, which I'll talk about in a little while when I get through all the layoff stories, is they're talking about how the unemployment claims are the lowest that they've been in 6 months. GM, they're another one. They just announced they're going to be laying off about 1,000 employees. They say that the 1,000 layoffs from GM are due to poor performance, and others are part of a review to organize priorities by the automaker. And they say a majority of the employees impacted are salaried workers in suburban Detroit at the automaker's Global Technical Center in Warren, Michigan. And this is a clue on what's going on with the auto industry and why you're seeing layoffs with GM. Take a look at this. The company is targeting $2 billion in fixed cost reductions this year as it deals with slowing U.S. sales, business deterioration in China, and a shift in its all-in strategy for electric vehicles amid slower expected consumer adoption. So because they're not selling nearly as many of electric cars as they were hoping that they would, they're going to have to shift their strategy on this and probably not be making as many of them anymore, especially since they can't sell them at a cost-effective price, and all because of these ridiculous EV mandates and things like this that we've seen from the government. It's causing a company like GM to have to let go all these people. All these people are losing jobs because of this. And just like McDonald's, this industry is seeing the perfect storm. EV mandates equals, higher costs for the company in terms of development and putting higher price tags on these cars they can't sell, which is dragging down their business. You have sales in general slowing down because people don't have the money to go out and buy these cars. I talked about this the other day as well, how the car payments have gotten completely out of control. Average car payments like over $760 a month right now for a new car. Some people even paying well over $1,000 a month. And then this whole push to make electric vehicles the standard, this is just like the perfect storm for the auto industry in terms of losing money and having to let people go. Just like McDonald's is experiencing the perfect storm with higher prices that people are unwilling to pay for low quality food, along with health outbreaks and not being able to be trusted anymore. However, a lot of people will question whether or not these layoffs are because of greed or because of necessity, because the UAW vice president, he said that GM is trying to cut about 50 UAW jobs when they're making record profits, and we will fight for our laid off members with the full force of our contract. So you have a company like GM, for example, making record profits, but they're letting go people and saying that they're losing too much money when it comes to developing electric cars and the sales being slow and all of this. You have another company that just announced layoffs this week, ExxonMobil. They're laying off about 400 workers in Texas, and Exxon said in a statement to USA Today that employees were offered transition roles and some turned the offers down. You have the federal government looking at a lot of potential layoffs or people just being forced to quit in the future, like we talked about the other day. Once Trump becomes president again and Elon Musk is in charge of helping to get our national budget under somewhat of a control, they're looking at making people return to the office, and this is anticipated to make thousands of government workers quit. And even though that's not a layoff, it's the same thing. You have people losing jobs over it. NASA, they just announced that they're going to be laying off hundreds of people. This is in NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. They're going to lay off a significant portion of its workforce, which amounts to about 5% of their workforce actually. And they all say a version of the same thing. While we have taken various measures to meet our current fiscal year 2025 budget allocation, we have reached the difficult decision to reduce the JPL workforce through layoffs. Like, there's really no industry that's safe right now and protected against layoffs, guys. Pretty much any type of business is fair game right now and could see a sudden layoff due to these businesses trying to remain profitable, and they're not very business friendly environment. When people don't have a lot of money to spend, working on space programs becomes deprioritized. You guys can see, just like in Bay Harbor Islands, these neighborhoods are changing little by little. This house, I think they were building this completely while it was gone. I can see down that way they're building another one. They knocked down that house over there. This one, building a brand new house over here. All of this just started happening in the span of the 5 months I've been gone, except for this one over here. I think they were already working on that one before. But I think this is kind of the future of Miami, guys. Like, and maybe a lot of other very high cost of living places too. You're gonna see a lot of these old houses that just haven't been maintained. I've seen a lot of this in Marin County too. You know, these old hippie houses that were built 60 years ago that still look the same in terrible condition and sell for millions of dollars. Who's gonna buy that and live in it? Nobody. Somebody's gonna buy that and tear it down and build a nice brand new house that's going to be a lot more expensive than the previous house. Another big mass layoff was just announced as well with MCR Health, which is a Bradenton-based nonprofit that specializes in healthcare for low-income communities. They filed for bankruptcy, and they said that mass layoffs will happen in the coming weeks. And MCR Health operates more than 48 healthcare centers and 13 pharmacies in Manatee, Sarasota, and DeSoto counties. So this is happening right here in Florida. Check it out, we have another house for sale here. Already the third one in the neighborhood that I just ran into. Current listing price is $2,115,000, but they listed it back in January of the beginning of this year for $2 million. So they thought it was a good idea to raise the price an additional $115,000 because it wasn't selling, right? They actually bought this house back in 2007 for $720,000, and the current property tax bill here is about $18,000 a year. This is just very common, guys. You see these houses that just sit on the market here. I mean, a whole year without selling. Maybe they're not in a hurry. Maybe they don't need to sell and they're just trying to test the market. Maybe they got an offer close to that 2 million and thought, hey, we can push it even higher than that, but it's not working. Another one just 2 doors down. They bought this house for only $1 million back in 2021, obviously tore down the old one and put up this new mansion here. They actually listed it back in May for $5.2 million, took the listing down, then relisted it for the same price, and now they just cut the price an additional $200,000 down to $4.99. Property taxes here are also about 20 grand a year right now, only because they bought it for only $1 million back then. Otherwise they'd be looking at a much higher price tag. I mean, the thing is, guys, as a local looking at houses like this, yeah, it's a nice big brand new house, but for $5 million you could buy a house on the water somewhere or get something nicer, I would say, for the price. And I don't think it's really worth this kind of money. And also, how many people have $5 million to drop on a house? I know I'm going back and forth a lot here, but I'm seeing a lot of houses for sale, so I'm just trying to show you guys what's going on. So here's the thing, going back to MCR Health, they announced that there's going to be mass layoffs, but they didn't even say how many people they're going to get rid of. So it's probably going to be a lot, especially when they use the word mass layoff. And they said in order to continue to allow MCR Health to remain a leader in providing healthcare and access for all, we have made some difficult decisions to align with our financial reality. Well, this is exactly what all governments need to do as well, including the federal government and all these local and state governments. They need to start aligning their goals with financial reality, because too many states and local governments, federal government are operating like cash is just unlimited and money's no object, when clearly that's not the case when you look at the amount of deficits that many different local governments are facing, and the national deficit is higher than ever. So they say more than 800 employees work for MCR Health, and everybody who's going to get laid off is going to be laid off before December 13th, guys. So right in time for the holidays, you're done. That's what's happening with this. Funny enough, after all of this, okay, the U.S. jobless claims, they say, just dropped to a 6-month low. The number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits fell to the lowest amount in 6 months. Now remember, this doesn't mean that no one's getting laid off. What this means is people just aren't applying for unemployment. But I would also argue that a lot of these people are no longer eligible for unemployment, because after 6 months, you can't be on unemployment anymore. So a lot of people who were laid off 6 months ago or longer no longer are eligible to receive unemployment. Don't forget that either. But also don't be fooled by headlines like this, because the number of jobless claims is still very high. Okay, they say the applications decreased by 4,000 to 217,000 for the week of November 9th. And the forecast was supposed to be 225,000. So it's not that far away from what it was projected to be. And this is how they're interpreting this data. They go, the recent data shows that the labor market remains resilient despite the Federal Reserve's effort to curb inflation and economic growth slowdown. So that's how delusional the people are who are making all the decisions, guys. They think that this is okay. And here's part of the problem too that people need to realize is because all these data sets are so manipulated and so adjusted towards making a certain base case that the data is not actually really reflecting the reality for a lot of people anymore. And also the latest jobless claims amount for the week is on average for the rest of 2024. You know, throughout most of the year, the weekly average jobless claims was 213,000. This recent reading was 217,000, slightly above that. But the headline doesn't say that it's above the average. It says it's the lowest that it's been in 6 months. So just watch out when you read these type of headlines, because it seems like most of the news headlines are usually geared towards making the economy and people in charge look good. And don't forget how wrong they've been with all sorts of things. You know, back in August, we saw the employment data revised down 818,000 fewer jobs than what they initially reported. So a lot of this stuff is all make-believe anyways. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.